dark readings. Welcome back to Halloweek 2022. We are here with our last video, The Origins of the Witch. I actually wrote this script out last year. It's based on a book by Max Dashu called Witches and Pagans, but I had way too many videos last week. I had like the whole month of October dedicated to Halloweek, and so I said, okay, I'll save a little something for next year. So I don't know if I would have written this script a little bit differently now than I did a year ago, but either way should be interesting. We're going to talk about the origins of the witch archetype in deities. We're going to talk about the origins of the word witch and its associations in different languages and times, and also touch on some very random associations with witches, such as the number 3, the act of weaving or knotting, and things along those lines, which you wouldn't expect but are actually quite linked to the witch concept. Before we go any further, I think it's important to talk a little bit about the word paganism, heathenism, and witchcraft, and differentiate between these concepts because sometimes people can get them mixed up. A pagan was someone using a non-mainstream religious belief system, usually that originated from the pre-Abrahamic times and sometimes was followed into the medieval era, and even today a lot of people identify as neo-pagans. The word paganus means villager or commoner. It's basically the belief system and practices of somebody from a village, a rural land. Pagans are animistic, meaning they believe even inanimate objects have a soul. They honor nature. This is because back in the day, nature was very important for determining if they were going to live or die. It was going to determine the fate of their crops and ensure whether or not they were going to survive the winter. They also honored cycles, lunar cycles. They often timed their agricultural practices with what stage the moon was in, trying to pick plants in full moon or waxing moon and so forth to promote further growth, to promote a bountiful harvest. They also celebrated the solar cycle as well, having different festivals and Sabbats for different times of the year. Menstrual cycles, something to honor as well. All of the cycles were something that pagans really honored. And yes, witchcraft and folk magic is also a component of paganism. So taking these old practices such as divination, such as scrying in water, being able to foretell the future in the surface of water in a copper bowl. Manifestation, doing things like burying spell jars containing sometimes bodily fluids and so forth. Like I said, collecting plants at a specific time in the moon cycle, saying an incantation to manifest a specific intention, such as protection of your household, and rituals and ceremonies for different purposes. The word pagan is actually very similar to the word heathen. A heath is a wildland, so again, heathen, a person of the wildlands. So paganus, person from the village, heathen, person from the wildlands, again, very similar concepts. Interestingly, the origins of the Spanish word for witch, which is bruja, has 3 meanings. The first is a heath or a wildland, the second is a woman of the heaths, and the third is the heathen, the people of the heaths, the pagans. So we see here an association between wildlands, women of the wildlands, and witchcraft, which is interesting when you think about like the archetype of the wild woman, such as in Clarissa Pinkola Estes' book, in which there is a very tangible, spiritual, witchy undercurrent running through the concept of the wild woman. A book that I actually really love as well is Woman Most Wild by Danielle Dulski, who is a witch. So again, this association between wild woman and witch is very strong because a wild woman knows nature and how it works and how to bend nature to her will, thereby making her a witch. Then when Christianity spread across the continent, it began vilifying and demonizing paganism, because how do you get a new religion to spread? You try to make the old religion seem evil and like you're going to hell for it. And there, this conflation between paganism and witchcraft became even more tight, and witchcraft was of course forbid as heresy or blasphemy. Even the idea of Satan was actually drawn to mirror and demonize the pagan god Baphomet, or a lot of different horned gods through different pagan cultures, such as even Dionysus, for instance, were used to shape the image of the Christian Satan, so that again we have this very strong correlation between paganism and evil. And this of course reached a climax when the witch hunt started and people were being murdered for even slightly pagan practices like whispering a chant for a specific intention or being accused of doing something like that, not even having any proof that they did it. where does the word witch come from? In Old English, there was the word weird. And by the way, there are going to be a lot of different words from a lot of different old languages here. I doubt I'm going to be able to pronounce all of them correctly, so I do apologize for that, but I will put the word I'm talking about on the screen so that you know how it's spelled. The word weird is actually the word for nodding, writing, ordaining, causing, and arousing. Nodding is important. We're going to get back to this. There is a strong association between nodding and witchcraft. Writing, ordaining, causing, arousing, all of these are manifestation verbs. All of these are words associated with being able to shape the way that the world goes. In 1385, the plural of weirds showed up in the phrase, the weirds that we call destiny. These weirds were women, and they shaped fortunes much like a witch does. The Old English name for a witch was also a weirding woman. Weirding women sought to find out how weird was spinning lives with her webs, essentially manifesting how people's lives were going to look by weaving together a tapestry of sorts. And the modern English word weird, which originally meant destiny, shifted to eerie, which is really interesting. So we went from weird woman, symbolizing a woman who creates, shapes destiny, who is a witch essentially, and that word currently means somebody that's unusual, that's strange, that's eerie. It really reflects our more stigmatized view of witchcraft today. Then there was the Old English word Wicca, the Low German Wiccan, the Anglo-Saxon Wiccian, which meant to enchant, to make magic. So we see here more directly a very blunt way of saying this is a witch. Wicca was used for male witches, whereas female ones were called Wicca, Wicci, Wicciki, Wicci, Witch, Wick, Witch, and Witch. In modern times, of course, Wicca is a branch of paganism, a more organized form of religion that uses witchcraft. There was also the word wyke, or week, I don't know, which meant to bind, twist, twine, and turn. So it was connected to spinning primarily. And the Anglo-Saxon witch meant a bundle of fiber which women twisted for wicks, for candles. Witch hazel originated from the Old English witche, or its pliant branches. The turning motion of a gate or a door gave us the word wicket. The turning of time gave rise to the week. The twisting of fibers was also called wicked, and only later became synonymous with evil, again once the old customs became a threat to newer religions. There was also the word witteg, which meant seeing or knowing, this one having associations with divination, being able to foresee the future. The word craft was from the Old English croft, which meant power, force, strength, cunning, knowledge, ability, skill, prescription, remedy. Women's craft involved spinning and weaving, plaiting, wickerwork, and knotting. So these very early associations of women who were spinning and weaving and working with candle wicks is associated with what later becomes witchcraft. Combine all the words associated with witch that I just listed, plus the word craft, we get someone who holds power and knowledge and skill, which they then use to weave the course of fate and to see hidden knowledge, which, if you think about it, is exactly what witchcraft is, if we're thinking specifically about manifestation and divination. So we know how similar words to the word witch originated, but what did the word witch specifically refer to? When we think of a witch, historically, what sort of associations did that have? What was a witch, essentially? The olden names for the witch emphasize the power of prophecy, divination, incantation, herbal knowledge, shape-shifting, and shamanic flight. And I talk about all these different things in last year's video on the psychology of witchcraft, so if you want a deeper in-depth into what all of these things are and mean, I highly suggest you check it out. I am pretty proud of that video, and I think you would like it. So I will put a card for that one of these places if you want to check it out. So the word witch was associated with healers and herb gathering, but of course, this too was demonized before long. So the word herbalist was rendered to venefica, or poisoner, thus vilifying something that was actually used to heal rather than to cause harm. You know, these herbal healers early on were like the early physicians, the midwives, the people that were healing people. By the early Middle Ages, the word witch was almost synonymous with the word pagan. Remember, pagans were country folk with ancient customs, and these now threatened Christianity. These common people, the pagans, would gather plants at certain times of the moon cycle or times of the day, like I said, to manifest abundance. Such rites actually still exist in Romania. There are babele meștere, these skilled old women who set out at dawn to gather mandrake with a red ribbon. Romania has a lot of preserved pagan customs that I think are so beautiful. On Midsummer's Eve, Romanian women had, I guess depends if it's still happening, a specific rite in which they would tie red yarn around an herb, draw water from 3 fountains, and gather it before dawn, twine it around their heads, go door to door singing, and then at nighttime carry out divination with a jug of water collected from the 3 springs. Transylvanians, also in Romania by the way, used to greet the belladonna plant every morning, calling her the Great Lady, because they basically personified her. They paid her a similar respect to vervain. Yes, vervain, the same herb that they use in the Vampire Diaries. There is a historical basis for how vervain was used to keep away evil spirits. Mugwort was said to reach its highest power on summer solstice and was one of the, I don't know how many herbs that they would throw into the bonfire. And so herbs and using herbs for healing was very much a big part of what a witch meant. The word witch was also associated with extrasensory sight. Slavic people have legends of dragons or serpent queens who grant second sight to humans who live underground for 9 years. This initiation gives them the power to use information that they learned in the underworld. 9 years is interesting because 9 is 3 times 3, and as we'll get to in a moment, the number 3 is sacred to divine feminine and witchcraft. If we look at this from a purely psychological point, it represents one's diving into the unconscious for a period of time in order to gain valuable information that you can then use in your conscious world. Some of the words for witches also refer to shamanic flight and shape-shifting, often in the form of an animal double. What this essentially means, and the reason they're linked, is that women could leave their body at will, essentially dissociate, induce an out-of-body experience to either fly through the sky, through astral realms, or to actually turn into another animal. Witches were said to take the form of a cat or a hare 9 times in their life, similar to the cat's 9 lives, and again 3 times 3. Dacians, the ancient ancestors of Romanians, were said to have lycanthropy initiation and war rites. Lycanthropy meaning they thought they would literally turn into wolves, yes, like in Game of Thrones. The Scandinavian Valkyries were goddesses said to choose who lost in war with their foreknowledge of their future, usually in groups of 9, and they were shapeshifters who sometimes appeared as swans. There was also some overlap between the witch and the dead, suggesting that witches could channel the dead spirits, necromancy. Witches were seen as boundary crossers. Haga, which now is associated with the word hag, which is associated with witchcraft and crones, meant hedge, border, boundary. Hagasusoa meant a hedgewoman, a liminal being, a boundary traveler between worlds. And of course, hag later evolved to female demon or ugly old woman and is associated with witches. What we can learn from this is that witches were seen as being able to traverse between realms, between the underworld, the human realm, the astral realm, and so forth. They were liminal beings, liminal as in neither here nor there, kind of like a beach is neither water nor land, kind of like a tree is neither in the heavens nor in the ground. Liminality is very closely linked to witchcraft. Witches were, of course, also diviners, fortune tellers, psychics. The Fates were said to be the ones that made the first runes on wood from the Tree of Life. Runa meant mystery. The Anglo-Saxon word rune meant mystery, secret, counsel, consultation. Runian meant to whisper, to murmur, to talk secrets, to conspire. Therefore, runes can be seen as objects which hold secrets that can counsel our decisions, which is exactly what they're used for today. They are used for foreseeing the future and relaying a message about what you should do, a type of divination. The 3 oldest runic inscriptions actually came not from the Nordic regions, but I was surprised to know this myself, Romania, Poland, and Eastern Germany, all places where the Goths roamed. Runes were not only associated with psychic knowledge, but also the underworld, since Hel-Runa is related to Hel, the Norse goddess of the underworld. Hel-Rune also means witch, one having knowledge of secrets of the dead, one who knows the secrets of Hell, not Hell, the place where in Christianity people burn in an inferno and it's a place of endless torment, but Hell in the original underworld sense, which was neutral. It was not particularly, hellfiery. I said that the number 3 was going to be important to witches, and here's why. I've already mentioned the 3 fates who weave a person's life, birth, and death. We also have the archetype of the triple goddess deity. This is sort of a 3-in-1 archetype. We have the maiden, the mother, and the crone. So the maiden represents growth, the moon in its waxing phase when it's starting to build up those intentions and working towards a manifested goal. She also represents youth, new life, freshness, childhood. The mother represents the full moon and also potency, fertility, compassion, protection, the sort of explosion of manifestation. And then the crone represents the waning moon, decrease, repose, wisdom, maturity, knowledge, experience, death, and rebirth. Because every time you get a waning moon, it is also getting closer to a waxing moon. After the darkest point, after the death as it were, that is where new life begins. The triple goddess is associated with feminine energy, mystery, and psychic abilities, as well as, again, obviously, the moon. And there have been a lot of different deities and archetypes across cultures that fall into this triple goddess mold. And they also fall very closely in line with the idea of weaving fate. The 3 fates exist as an archetype across European legends. They are feminine healers, judges, spinners of golden threads who assign fortunes to people. The word fate comes from the Latin word fari, to speak. To speak the divine word, thus foretelling destiny. The modern word fate is actually associated to this, which is how we get, of course, the modern day fate, which basically means destiny. In Romania, there are the 3 ursitoare who appear 3 nights after a child's birth to determine its life course. The Greeks called them the moire, Thoth the spinner, Lachesis the weaver, Atropos who cut the cord of life at death. In Norse culture, there were the 3 Norns, Urdur, Verdande, and Skuld, who shaped destiny through weaving, and in weaving the spirals represent life. Spirals are typically associated with femininity, fertility, and also life, because what was leads to what shall be and then turns back into what was. Again, talking about the infinite loop and cycle of life and death and rebirth. It reflects the turns of time, the cyclical nature of everything. Earth herself revolves around an axis and also turns through time. In a way, she is the old goddess spinning on her axis in a whirl of time. The Romans called them the Parcae, the Nona, Decima, and Morta. The weird was, like I mentioned again, the Anglo-Saxon triple goddess, who was said to dwell in a cave with a cauldron. There were different ancient goddesses who were known for spinning out destinies, such as Hittite, Papaya, Istustaya. So we see this connection between triple goddesses and weaving of fate constantly across cultures. The 9 Valkyries were actually said to weave a web while singing, which determined the outcome of a battle. And again, 9 is 3 times 3, so it makes perfect sense. The Anglo-Saxons had peace weavers who made tapestries for friendship and amnesty. Incantations and singing were also used to charm clothing as they were being weaved. In most traditions, including even Amish traditions, it is said to be blasphemy, unthinkable to not leave a slight imperfection into whatever you're weaving, because it is said only deities can weave something perfect. So again, if 3 is sacred, then so is 9, because it's 3 times 3. It's a sacred thing done the number of times that it is sacred, if that makes sense. So there were also the 9 Fatas. The Celtic female figures typically appeared in multitudes of 3, the 9 maidens of Welsh legends, the 9 Corriganid in Breton, the 9 Cinziene in Romanian fairy lore, which I thought was really fascinating because I didn't know that originally the Romanian fairy Cinziene come from the word Diana, the Greek goddess who was also associated with witchcraft and the moon and everything. It went from Diana to Zayana to Zuna. Zuna meaning like fairy godmother in modern Romanian. There were the 9 Norse daughters of the sea, the 9 goddesses who live under the Cosmos tree, the 9 Valkyries. The Norse goddess of the dead, Hel, has power over 9 worlds. So yeah, the number 9 is pretty important too. And not only is weaving also associated with ancient mythological witches, but so is knotting. Knotting was frequently used by pagans for the purposes of magic. The Latin word ligature meant tying, which was synonymous with an amulet or a consecrated knot. Knotting was commonly used to bind disease so that it wouldn't further infect a person. Modern Romanians, again, something I didn't know, use ritual knotting charms to cure people of ailments. They tie 9 knots, repealing a healing charm, place the cord in water, make the person wear it for 3 days, and so forth. It's related to the modern knotting spell in English, which goes, by knot of 1 the spell's begun, by knot of 2 it shall be true, by knot of 3 so mote it be, by knot of 4 this power I store, by knot of 5 the spell's alive, by knot of 6 the spell I fix, by knot of 7 events all leaven, by knot of 8 it shall be fate, by knot of 9 what's done is mine. Shamanic knots were also used by the Mesopotamians, Arab, and Hebrew magicians. In Russia, wizards are called knot tiers. Medieval people made love knots, friendship knots, betrothal knots. In a lot of modern Wiccan and pagan weddings, they knot their arms together, sort of binding their hands. And so knotting, just like weaving, is also considered magical, associated with the triple goddess and with witches in general. So that's pretty much all I have for you today. I know it was very historical and linguistic, and I hope that this was interesting because it's not the typical thing I throw out here. I will link Dashu's book in the description box if you'd like to purchase it. It's pretty dense, but as you can tell, it is a wealth of knowledge. This is actually the second video that I've made that's inspired by that book alone, and it's also informed like presentations that I've made for class. And so I do recommend it, and I hope that this video was fun for you as it was for me. I had a blast filming it, writing it, executing it. I will leave you there. I hope you have a great rest of your month and a great November as you go into it, and I'll see you soon, sadly without Halloweek, with regular topics. Bye.